Welcome to my channel, a list that brings your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's
The scent of truffle oil and seared ribeye filled the air of Bellissimo, mixing with the subtle notes of expensive cologne and whispered conversations. My feet ached in the mandatory 3-inch heels as I balanced 3 plates of pasta along my forearm. 8 hours into a 10-hour shift, and the weight of exhaustion pressed down on my shoulders like a familiar friend. Table 7 needs more bread, Ellie, Marco hissed as he passed, not bothering to look at me. I was invisible here, just another waitress in a black uniform, moving between tables of people who could spend on one meal what I made in a week. "I'll get to it," I whispered, though he was already gone. I delivered the pasta dishes with a practiced smile that never quite reached my eyes, the one reserved for guests who would tip well if they believed I cared about their dining experience. The restaurant hummed with the quiet energy of a Tuesday night, not packed, but steady. I'd been working at Bellissimo for nearly 8 months now, ever since Dad's medical bills had forced me to drop out of nursing school. One day, I promised myself, one day I'd go back. I was refilling water glasses when the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle at first, a heightened awareness among the staff, a straightening of shoulders, hushed whispers. Then came Marco's hand on my elbow, his fingers digging into my skin. "He's here," he said, voice tight. "Mr. Vitiello, your section." "Don't screw this up." My stomach dropped as I glanced toward the entrance. Everyone knew about Alessio Vitiello, though few had seen him. Owner of half the businesses in the city, including Bellissimo. The kind of man whose name was only spoken in whispers, whose reputation preceded him like a shadow. 2 men in dark suits entered first, scanning the dining room with calculated efficiency. Then he walked in. He wasn't what I expected. Taller, for one thing, broader through the shoulders. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than my apartment. Dark hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and cold authority. He didn't look around like his men had. He didn't need to. The world adjusted to him, not the other way around. Marco led them to the corner table in my section, the one always kept reserved, though I'd never known why until now. I watched as Mr. Vitiello sat with his back to the wall, facing the entrance. His men remained standing until he made a small gesture, and one took the seat across from him, while the other positioned himself nearby, scanning the room continuously. "Now, Ellie." Marco nudged me forward, and suddenly my legs felt leaden. I approached their table, notepad clutched in damp fingers. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Ellie, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink?" When Mr. Vitiello looked up at me, I nearly dropped my pen. His eyes were so dark they appeared black in the dim restaurant lighting, framed by thick lashes that seemed wasted on a man. Those eyes assessed me in one swift glance that somehow left me feeling both seen and dismissed in the span of a heartbeat. "Macallan. Neat." His voice was low, accented slightly. Italian, I guessed, though softened by years in America. I nodded, scribbling it down though I wouldn't forget. "And for you, sir?" I asked his companion. "The same." I escaped to the bar, legs trembling slightly. It was ridiculous to be so affected by a man's presence. He was just another customer, a dangerous one, perhaps, but still human. "To Macallan, neat," I told Carlo, the bartender. He raised an eyebrow. "Vitiello's here?" "Table 11. Carlo nodded, selecting a bottle from the top shelf. "Don't make eye contact unless he speaks to you directly," he advised, pouring the amber liquid with practiced precision. "Be efficient. Don't hover." "I know how to wait tables," I said, more sharply than intended. "This isn't about waiting tables." Carlo slid the glasses onto my tray. "This is about survival." I returned to the table, setting down the drinks with steady hands that belied my nervousness. Mr. Vitiello was on the phone now, speaking rapid Italian in that same low voice. His companion was studying a leather portfolio. Neither acknowledged me. The night progressed. They ordered Wagyu steaks, rare, a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly rent. I moved efficiently between their table and my others, careful not to neglect any customers while giving Mr. Vitiello's table the attention it demanded. It was nearly 10 when the atmosphere shifted again. I was clearing plates from a nearby table when I noticed Mr. Vitiello's bodyguard tense almost imperceptibly. A group of 4 men had entered the restaurant, being seated in the far corner. Nothing unusual about them, business suits, quiet conversation. But something had changed in the air. Mr. Vitiello seemed unaffected, still engaged in conversation with his associate. But I noticed his bodyguard's hand slipping inside his jacket, the subtle tightening around Mr. Vitiello's eyes. I continued working, hyper-aware now of every movement in the dining room. The new group ordered drinks, studied menus. One man kept glancing toward Mr. Vitiello's table. Again. Nothing overt. Nothing that would seem suspicious to anyone not paying attention. But I was paying attention. Years of navigating my father's mood swings had taught me to read a room, to sense danger before it materialized. I was delivering dessert menus to another table when I saw it, a flash of red light dancing across the dining room. At first, I thought it was someone's phone, a reflection off a watch. Then it steadied, a crimson dot that came to rest directly over Mr. Vitiello's heart. Time slowed. In nursing school, they'd taught us about crisis response, how some people freeze, some flee, some fight. I'd never known which I would be until that moment. My body moved before my mind could process what was happening. The tray in my hands clattered to the floor as I lunged across the short distance to Mr. Vitiello's table. I collided with him hard, knocking his substantial frame backward as his chair tipped. We crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs just as the window behind us shattered. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the restaurant as patrons dove under tables. Mr. Vitiello's bodyguard had his weapon drawn, shouting orders. The man who'd been sitting with Mr. Vitiello pulled me roughly off his boss, shoving me aside as he helped him up. Mr. Vitiello's dark eyes found mine, wide with surprise, and something else I couldn't identify. Blood trickled from a cut on his cheekbone. From the fall or flying glass, I couldn't tell. For one suspended moment, we stared at each other as the world erupted around us. Then his men closed ranks, surrounding him. Someone grabbed my arm, Marco, his face ashen. "What did you do?" he hissed, dragging me toward the kitchen. I couldn't form coherent thoughts, adrenaline making my heart pound painfully against my ribs. "Shut up!" Marco snapped, pushing me through the swinging doors into the relative quiet of the kitchen. The staff had gathered, wide-eyed and silent. "Stay here, all of you, don't move." He left us there, returning to the chaos in the dining room. Through the round windows in the doors, I could see police lights beginning to flash outside. Mr. Vitiello and his men were nowhere to be seen. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. One of the line cooks silently passed me a glass of water, which I gulped gratefully. "What happened out there?" Carlo asked, his usual swagger subdued. "Someone..." I swallowed hard. "I think someone tried to shoot Mr. Vitiello." A collective intake of breath. Everyone knew what this meant. A hit on Alessio Vitiello would trigger a war that would paint the city red. "And you pushed him out of the way?" Lisa, another waitress, asked incredulously. "Are you insane?" Perhaps I was. I'd acted on instinct. The same instinct that had made me try to save my father when he'd collapsed from his first heart attack. The training that had been drilled into me. Preserve life, no matter whose. Now I'd saved the life of one of the most dangerous men in the city, a man who'd built his empire on violence and fear. The kitchen door swung open, and we all flinched. It was Marco, his face grim. "Ellie, come with me." My legs felt like rubber as I followed him back through the restaurant. Police officers were interviewing shaken patrons. Crime scene tape was already being strung across the shattered window. Marco led me to the private dining room at the back of the restaurant. My heart nearly stopped when he opened the door. Alessio Vitiello sat at the head of the table, still immaculate despite the chaos, save for the small bandage now on his cheekbone. His dark eyes locked onto mine the moment I entered. 4 men stood around him, including the bodyguard who had been at his table. "Leave us," Mr. Vitiello said, his voice cutting through the silence. Marco disappeared, closing the door behind him. I stood frozen in the doorway, suddenly acutely aware of my rumpled uniform, my disheveled hair, the bruise forming on my arm where I'd hit the floor. "Sit." He gestured to the chair nearest him. I moved woodenly, sinking into the plush chair without taking my eyes off him. Up close, in the brighter light of the private room, I could see his eyes weren't black after all, but a dark brown so deep they appeared bottomless. "Your name," not a question. A command. Ellie. Ellie Matthews. Why did you do it, Ellie Matthews? I swallowed, my throat dry. I saw the red dot. On your chest. I just reacted. He studied me, his expression unreadable. You saved my life. It wasn't a question, so I didn't respond. One of his men moved closer, whispering something in Italian. Mr. Vitiello nodded without taking his eyes off me. You understand what you've done? He asked finally. I didn't. Not really. But I was beginning to. I have enemies, Ms. Matthews. Enemies who will not be pleased that their plan failed tonight. He leaned forward slightly. Enemies who might wonder why a waitress would risk her life for a man like me. The implication hung in the air between us. In saving his life, I had painted a target on my own back. I didn't think, I said truthfully. I just acted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. A rare quality. He reached inside his jacket, and I tensed instinctively, but he merely withdrew a business card, sliding it across the table to me. My private number. If anyone approaches you, if you notice anything unusual, you call me immediately. I stared at the card, simple black text on heavy cream stock. Just a name and number. Take it, he insisted. I did, tucking it into my pocket with trembling fingers. He stood then, buttoning his jacket in one fluid motion. His men moved immediately, readying for departure. You will be compensated for your quick thinking tonight. That's not necessary. It wasn't a question. His tone brooked no argument. Someone will drive you home. You will not return to work this week. Again, not a request. I nodded numbly. As they prepared to leave, he paused beside my chair, looking down at me with those unfathomable eyes. Few people would have done what you did tonight, Ellie Matthews. Fewer still would have succeeded. His voice lowered, meant for my ears alone. I do not forget such debts. With that, he was gone, his men closing around him like a living shield as they exited through what I realized must be a private entrance. I sat alone in the silent room, the weight of what had happened, what I had done, finally crashing over me. I had saved a monster from death, and in doing so, I had bound my fate to his. Sleep eluded me that night. Every car that passed my apartment building, every distant siren, every creak of the old pipes had me sitting bolt upright, heart racing. The business card sat on my nightstand, Alessio Vitiello's name glaring at me in the darkness like an accusation. True to his word, a man in a black suit had driven me home in a car with tinted windows so dark I could barely see the streets passing by. He hadn't spoken except to verify my address, and I hadn't tried to make conversation. When we'd arrived at my modest apartment building in a neighborhood that had seen better days, he'd waited silently until I was inside before driving away. By morning, exhaustion had settled into my bones. I made coffee with shaking hands and turned on the local news, half expecting to see reports of violence erupting across the city. Instead, there was only a brief mention of an incident at Bellissimo restaurant, broken glass, no injuries reported. The attempted assassination of Alessio Vitiello had been scrubbed from public record as though it had never happened. My phone rang shortly after 9, making me jump. It was Marco. You're on paid leave for the rest of the week, he said without preamble. Mr. Vitiello's orders. Marco, what's happening? The police. There is no police investigation. He cut me off, voice tight. It never happened, Ellie. Do you understand? I understood all too well. Power like Vitiello's extended far beyond his criminal enterprises. It reached into the police department, the mayor's office, perhaps even higher. Yes, I said quietly. Good. I'll call you when you can return to work. He hung up without saying goodbye. I spent the day in a daze, alternating between pacing my small apartment and staring out the window at the street below. By afternoon, cabin fever drove me to the corner store for groceries, a 5-minute walk I'd made hundreds of times before. Today it felt like running a gauntlet. Every passing car seemed to slow near me. Every stranger's glance held potential threat. I was being paranoid, I told myself. No one knew what I'd done except those who had been in the restaurant. I was reaching for a carton of eggs when I felt it. The prickling sensation of being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the small store, an elderly woman comparing prices on bread. a teenager scrolling through his phone, the bored cashier, and at the end of the aisle, a man in a dark jacket studying the shelves of canned goods with too much intensity. My hand shook as I placed the eggs in my basket. It could be nothing. It could be my imagination, frayed nerves making me see threats where none existed. I paid for my groceries and hurried home, checking over my shoulder every few steps. The man from the store didn't follow, but the feeling of being observed never quite left me. Inside my apartment, I locked the door and slid the chain into place, then sank down onto my worn couch, Vitiello's card clutched in my hand. Was I overreacting? Probably. But his words echoed in my mind. Enemies who might wonder why a waitress would risk her life for a man like me. I didn't call the number, not yet. Instead, I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away some of the tension in my muscles. I was toweling my hair dry when a knock at the door froze me in place. No one ever came to my apartment unannounced. I had few friends in the city, and those I had always texted first. I crept to the door, pulse hammering in my throat as I peered through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, elegant in a tailored navy dress, dark hair swept into a sleek bun. Not someone I recognized. Not someone who belonged in my building with its peeling paint and temperamental elevator. Ms. Matthews? Her voice was cultured, accent similar to Vitiello's but more pronounced. My name is Sophia Ricci. I work for Mr. Vitiello. May I speak with you? I hesitated, hand on the chain. How did you know where I live? Mr. Vitiello knows where all his employees live, she said simply, as though this were the most natural thing in the world. I assure you, I mean no harm. Quite the opposite. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. Sophia Ricci was younger than I'd first thought, perhaps early 30s, with sharp features softened by a professional smile. She carried a sleek leather portfolio similar to the one I'd seen on Vitiello's table the night before. Thank you, she said, stepping inside. Her gaze swept my apartment in one quick assessment. I saw it through her eyes, the second-hand furniture, the water stain on the ceiling I couldn't get the landlord to fix, the textbooks stacked on the coffee table from the classes I could no longer attend. What does Mr. Vitiello want? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest. To express his gratitude, she opened her portfolio and withdrew an envelope, holding it out to me. This should cover any inconvenience. I didn't take it. I didn't do it for money. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps. Nevertheless, she said, placing the envelope on my coffee table, Mr. Vitiello pays his debts. Curiosity won out. I picked up the envelope and opened it, then nearly dropped it when I saw what was inside, more cash than I'd ever seen in one place. This is too much, I said, trying to hand it back to her. Sophia shook her head. The amount is not negotiable, neither is this. She withdrew a second envelope. Your father's medical bills have been settled in full. Additionally, funds have been arranged for your continued education, once you're ready to return to nursing school. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the couch. How does he know about my father, about school? She didn't answer directly. Mr. Vitiello is a thorough man. He likes to understand the people in his orbit. I'm not in his orbit, I protested weakly. Sophia's smile didn't reach her eyes. You entered it the moment you saved his life, Ms. Matthews. She glanced at her watch. Now, I'm to inform you that a car will arrive for you at 7 tomorrow evening. Mr. Vitiello would like to thank you personally. I have to work, I began, then remembered. Paid leave. Vitiello's orders. Dress nicely, Sophia advised, moving toward the door. Nothing too formal. Mr. Vitiello appreciates simplicity. After she left, I sat motionless, staring at the envelopes on my table. The money would solve so many problems. Dad's medical bills had been crushing me since his second heart attack. This would give him a fighting chance, allow me to return to school, but I understood what it was, the beginning of a debt I could never repay. A binding. I picked up my phone and called my father. He answered on the third ring, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes before his first heart attack had scared him into quitting. Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay? You don't usually call during the day. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Everything's fine, Dad. How are you feeling? Same as always. Dr. Mills wants to try another medication, but you know how it is. Insurance won't cover it. What if that wasn't a problem anymore? I asked carefully. The insurance, I mean. A pause. Ellie, what have you done? Nothing bad, I said quickly. I got a bonus at work, a big one, and I want to use it for your treatment. Honey, wait tables at a fancy restaurant pays well, but not that well. What kind of bonus are we talking about? I closed my eyes, constructing a lie that would satisfy him without revealing the truth. I saved someone important from choking. They were really grateful. Dad was silent for a long moment. You always were a terrible liar, Ellie. But if you don't want to tell me, I won't push. Just promise me you're not in any trouble. I'm not, I said, hoping it was true. I love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. Call you tomorrow? I hung up, my resolution solidifying. I would accept Vitiello's gratitude, his money, for Dad, for my future. But I would keep my distance after that. I would not become entangled in his world any more than I already was. The next evening, I stood in front of my closet, agonizing over what dress nicely meant to someone like Alessio Vitiello. I settled on a simple black dress I'd worn to a cousin's wedding last year. It was the most expensive thing I owned, though I knew it would pale in comparison to whatever Sofia Ricci wore on a casual Tuesday. At exactly 7, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Downstairs. The same black car from the night of the incident was parked at the curb. The same silent driver held the door for me. This time, though, I wasn't alone in the back seat. Ms. Matthews. Sophia greeted me with a nod. You look lovely. Where are we going? I asked as the car pulled away from the curb. Mr. Vitiello's home. He prefers privacy for conversations of this nature. My stomach tightened. What nature is that? Sophia's gaze was appraising. He'll explain himself. We drove in silence after that, leaving the city behind as we wound into the hills, where houses grew larger and further apart, hidden behind gates and hedges. Finally, we turned onto a private drive that curved through manicured grounds, before revealing a house that took my breath away. Modern, all clean lines and glass, perched on the hillside with the city spread out below like a carpet of lights. Security was visible everywhere. Men in dark suits patrolled the grounds. Cameras followed our approach. The driver had to pass through 2 checkpoints before we reached the main entrance. Inside, the house was a study in understated luxury. No gilded cherubs or flashy displays of wealth, just perfect proportions, museum-quality art, and furnishings that whispered rather than shouted their quality. Sophia led me through to a terrace overlooking the city, and there he was. Alessio Vitiello stood at the stone balustrade, his back to us, silhouetted against the twilight sky. He wore dark trousers and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing powerful forearms, no jacket, no tie. He turned as we approached, and I saw the small bandage still on his cheekbone from the cut he'd received during his fall. Ms. Matthews, he said, voice as I remembered it. Low, slightly accented, commanding without effort. Thank you for coming. Sophia melted away without a word, leaving us alone on the terrace. Your home is beautiful, I said, because the silence felt too heavy. It serves its purpose. He gestured to a seating area where a bottle of wine was already open, breathing in the evening air. Please. I sat on the edge of a cushioned chair, too nervous to relax. Vitiello poured 2 glasses of wine, handing one to me before taking the seat opposite. Has Sophia explained the arrangements? He asked. I nodded. Yes. It's extremely generous. Too generous. You saved my life, he said simply. In my world, such a debt cannot be measured in mere dollars. I'm not looking to be indebted to you, Mr. Vitiello, I said, surprising myself with my boldness, or for you to be indebted to me. He studied me over the rim of his wine glass, those dark eyes unreadable. And yet, here we are. He set down his glass. You intrigue me, Ellie Matthews. A nursing student waiting tables to pay for her father's medical care. No criminal record. No connections to my world. Yet when that moment came, you acted without hesitation. As I said, I didn't think. I just reacted. Yes. That is what makes it remarkable. He leaned forward slightly. Do you know how rare that quality is? To act without calculation of personal benefit or risk? I didn't know how to respond. In the fading light, with the city glittering below us, it was hard to reconcile this thoughtful, articulate man with the criminal I knew him to be. I've had you investigated, of course, he continued, as casually as if discussing the weather. A precaution. I needed to be certain you weren't planted there. Planted? By whom? By whomever wanted me dead. His expression hardened briefly before returning to its impassive state. But you are exactly who you appear to be, which presents me with an interesting dilemma. What dilemma? What to do with you? His words sent a chill down my spine. What to do with me? I repeated, setting my barely touched wine on the table between us. I don't understand. Alessio Vitiello's expression softened fractionally. Perhaps that was poorly phrased. English is not my first language, though I've lived here many years. He leaned back in his chair, regarding me thoughtfully. What I meant was, your actions have created a connection between us, one that cannot be severed with a simple financial transaction. Why not? I asked. You've paid my father's medical bills. You've given me enough money to finish school. Our transaction is complete. A smile touched his lips, genuine amusement lighting his eyes. You speak to me as few dare to. Another quality I find refreshing. He stood, moving to the balustrade again. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. I joined him at the edge of the terrace, the night air cool against my skin. From this vantage point, the city spread before us like a glittering tapestry, beautiful and distant. The man who tried to kill me, Vitiello said quietly, was working for Dominic Russo. Do you know that name? I shook my head. He controls the east side of the city. We have maintained an uneasy peace for nearly 5 years, his voice hardened. Until last night. Why would he break the peace? I asked, immediately regretting the question. This wasn't my world, not my business. But Vitiello answered without hesitation. Because his son was arrested last month with enough heroin to put him away for decades. Russo believes I provided information to the police. Did you? His dark eyes flickered to mine. No, I don't deal in heroin. It destroys communities, creates too much attention, but Russo needs someone to blame. He turned back to the view. Now I must respond. Blood demands blood. The casual way he spoke of violence made my stomach turn. This was the reality of the man whose life I'd saved. A world of vendettas and retribution, where human life was currency. What does any of this have to do with me? I asked. The shooter saw you intervene. He'll have reported back to Russo. Vitiello's gaze was penetrating. They'll wonder who you are, why you acted. If you're valuable to me. Understanding dawned, cold and clear. You think they might come after me to get to you? He inclined his head slightly. It's a possibility I cannot discount. But I'm nothing to you, I protested. Just a waitress who happened to be there. Perhaps. His voice lowered. But they don't know that. And after tonight, it wouldn't be entirely true, would it? The implication hung in the air between us. By accepting his help, by coming to his home, I'd already stepped across an invisible line. So, what happens now? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. You'll be protected, he said simply, discreetly. You won't notice them, but my men will ensure your safety. For how long? Until the situation with Russo is resolved. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. And if I refuse? I asked. Vitiello studied me, his expression unreadable. You are not a prisoner, Ellie. You're free to refuse, but I cannot guarantee your safety if you do. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. But the message was clear. I was involved now, whether I liked it or not. What about my father? Worry clutched at my chest. If they investigate me, your father has been relocated to a private medical facility upstate, Vitiello said. The best cardiac care unit on the East Coast. He was told it was arranged through a hospital charity program. I stared at him, speechless. He'd thought of everything, moved pieces on a chessboard I hadn't even known existed. You moved my father without asking me? I did what was necessary to keep him safe, Vitiello replied unapologetically. Would you have preferred I left him vulnerable? The worst part was, he was right. If someone came looking for leverage against me, Dad would be the first place they'd look. When did this happen? I managed to ask. This afternoon. He's comfortable. You can visit him tomorrow if you wish. I turned away, overwhelmed by the casual display of power. In less than 48 hours, Alessio Vitiello had infiltrated every aspect of my life, rearranging it to suit his purposes. The terrifying part was how easily he'd done it, as if the normal rules that govern society simply didn't apply to him. I should go home, I said, suddenly desperate to escape this beautiful prison on the hill, to return to my small apartment, where at least the walls were my own. Of course. Vitiello made no move to stop me. Sophia will arrange a car. As if summoned by her name, the elegant woman appeared at the terrace entrance. Sir? Ms. Matthews is ready to leave. Please see that she gets home safely. Sophia nodded, gesturing for me to follow. Ellie. Vitiello's voice stopped me at the threshold. I turned back to find him watching me, his expression softer than I'd yet seen it. I regret that my debt to you has brought this complication into your life. But I promise you this, no harm will come to you or your father while I draw breath. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like another chain binding me to him. I followed Sophia back through the immaculate house to the waiting car. The same silent driver held the door open, his eyes scanning the surroundings continuously. I wondered if he was one of the men who would be watching me in the coming days. Ms. Matthews. Sophia's voice drew my attention as we settled into the back seat. Mr. Vitiello asked me to give you this. She held out a small black phone, for emergencies only. It connects directly to security personnel. Use it if you feel threatened or notice anything unusual. I took the phone reluctantly, slipping it into my purse. How long will this last? This protection. Sophia's gaze was sympathetic but firm. As long as necessary. Try to go about your normal routine. The men assigned to you are professionals. You won't even notice them. Somehow, that wasn't reassuring. The drive back to my apartment passed in silence. When we arrived, Sophia walked me to my door, an unnecessary courtesy that felt more like making sure I went where I was supposed to. Your father is at Mount Sinai Medical Center, she said, as I unlocked my door. Private wing, room 412. Visiting hours begin at 9. I nodded wordlessly. One more thing. She hesitated, then spoke more quietly. Mr. Vitiello is not a man who forms attachments easily. The fact that he's taken a personal interest in your situation is unusual. I don't want his interest, I said, voice low. I just want my life back. Sophia smiled sadly. I understand. But we rarely get what we want in this life, Ms. Matthews. Only what we're given. She turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, there are worse men to be indebted to. After she left, I locked my door and leaned against it, exhaustion washing over me in waves. The black phone sat heavily in my purse, a tangible reminder of my new reality. I slept fitfully that night, dreams filled with red laser dots and shattering glass. Morning came too soon, gray light filtering through my blinds as I dragged myself from bed. The hospital was a 45-minute drive upstate. I called a rideshare, but when I stepped outside my building, a black sedan was already waiting at the curb. The driver, different from last night's, nodded respectfully. Ms. Matthews, I'm to take you to see your father. I hesitated, then got in. There seemed little point in refusing when Vitiello clearly knew my intentions before I'd even acted on them. The Mount Sinai Medical Center was exactly as Sophia had described. Exclusive, state-of-the-art, the kind of place that catered to the wealthy and powerful. I was led through hushed corridors to a private room where my father sat propped up in bed, looking better than I'd seen him in months. Ellie! His face lit up when I entered. Have you seen this place? It's like a hotel. And the doctors, top-notch, every one of them. I hugged him tightly, fighting back tears. You look good, Dad. Feel good, too. Dr. Patel says they're going to try me on a new medication, something that's still in trials, but he pulled some strings. He patted my hand. Now, are you going to tell me what this is really about? Because I know damn well this isn't any hospital charity program. I sank into the chair beside his bed. It's complicated. I'm not senile yet, sweetheart. I can handle complicated. So I told him a version of the truth, that I'd helped an important man at the restaurant, that he was wealthy and influential, that he'd wanted to repay me. I left out the assassination attempt, the Mafia connections, the threat now hanging over both our heads. Dad listened without interrupting, his eyes so like my own, studying my face in that way he had of seeing through my half-truths. "This man," he said when I'd finished, "he's dangerous, isn't he?" I looked away. "Why would you think that?" "Because no one pays medical bills for strangers out of the goodness of their heart." He squeezed my hand. "And because I know my daughter. You're worried, even though you're trying not to show it. He's powerful," I admitted. "But he's not a threat to us. He's grateful for what I did, that's all." Dad didn't look convinced. "What's his name?" I hesitated. "Alessio Vitiello." Recognition flickered in his eyes. Even tucked away in his suburban home, my father knew that name. Everyone did. "Ellie." His voice was tight with concern. "What have you gotten yourself into?" "It's temporary," I assured him, trying to believe it myself. "Once things settle down, we'll both go back to our normal lives." "But with your medical bills paid, and enough money for me to finish nursing school," he shook his head. "Some debts cost more than money, sweetheart." We spent the rest of the day together, carefully avoiding further discussion of Alessio Vitiello. Dad showed me around the facility, the gardens, the gourmet cafeteria, the physical therapy room with equipment I'd only seen in top university hospitals during my training. Every luxury, every advanced treatment option, a reminder of the gilded cage Vitiello had constructed around us. When visiting hours ended, the same black car was waiting to take me home. I was beginning to understand that this would be my life now. Watched, managed, protected, until Vitiello decided otherwise. The days blurred together after that. I remained on paid leave from Bellissimo. I visited my father daily, watching as the new treatments began to improve his condition dramatically. I contacted my old nursing program, arranging to re-enroll for the following semester. On the surface, everything was improving. The constant weight of financial worry had lifted. Dad was getting better. My future, once precarious, now seemed secure. But underneath, anxiety gnawed at me. I began to notice the subtle signs of surveillance. The same cars parked on my street. The men who appeared to be reading newspapers in the cafe across from my apartment building. The feeling of eyes following me whenever I left home. Vitiello's men, keeping their promise to protect me. Or Russo's, watching and waiting. I couldn't tell the difference, and that terrified me more than anything. A week after the incident at the restaurant, my phone rang. My regular phone, not the black one that remained untouched in my nightstand drawer. Ellie Matthews. The voice was Vitiello's, unmistakable even through the tinny connection. My heart stuttered. "Yes?" "I'm hosting a dinner tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. I'd like you to attend." Not a request. Never a request with him. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said carefully. It wasn't a suggestion. His tone softened slightly. "The situation with Russo is evolving. There are things you should be aware of, for your own safety." I closed my eyes, weighing my options. Did I even have any? "I'll be there," I said finally. "A car will collect you at 6:30. He paused. "Wear the blue dress in the box that will be delivered to you this afternoon." Before I could respond, he'd hung up. The box arrived exactly as he'd said it would, delivered by a courier who disappeared before I could ask questions. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a dress of midnight blue silk that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. With it was a note, handwritten in elegant script. "The color will complement your eyes. A.V." I stared at the note, a chill running through me that had nothing to do with the air temperature. He'd noticed the color of my eyes. He'd selected a dress specifically for them. The personal attention was more unsettling than all the surveillance combined. The blue dress fit perfectly, as if it had been made for me. I didn't want to think about how Vitiello knew my measurements, what other details about me he had catalogued and filed away in that calculating mind of his. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman who looked back at me. The silk draped elegantly, highlighting curves I usually kept hidden under waitress uniforms and practical clothing. The color did indeed bring out the blue of my eyes, making them appear more vivid against my pale skin. I'd left my blonde hair down, falling in soft waves past my shoulders. No jewelry except the simple silver earrings that had been my mother's. Nothing that would suggest I was trying too hard to impress. The black car arrived precisely at 6:30. This time I was prepared for it, waiting in the lobby of my building rather than making them come to my door. Small rebellions, perhaps meaningless, but they helped me maintain some illusion of control. To my surprise, Alessio Vitiello himself sat in the back seat. He wore a black suit that fit his broad shoulders impeccably, a crisp white shirt open at the collar. No tie. His dark hair was styled back from his forehead, emphasizing the strong lines of his face. The cut on his cheekbone had healed, leaving only the faintest mark. Ellie. He smiled as I slid into the seat beside him. The scent of his cologne, something subtle and expensive, filling the enclosed space. You look beautiful. Thank you for the dress, I said stiffly, though it wasn't necessary. I disagree. His eyes traveled over me with frank appreciation that made heat rise to my cheeks. It suits you. The car pulled away from the curb, and I turned to look out the window, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. You said there were things I should know. About the situation with Russo. Vitiello studied me for a moment longer before his expression shifted, becoming more businesslike. Yes, there have been developments. Russo has denied responsibility for the attempt on my life. Do you believe him? No, but his denial creates complications. His jaw tightened. There are protocols in our world, Ellie. Rules of engagement. By denying involvement, Russo forces my hand in specific ways. I didn't want to ask, but found myself doing so anyway. What ways? I must prove his involvement before I can retaliate. Otherwise, I risk appearing either weak or unjustified. His voice was calm, discussing violence and retribution as casually as someone else might discuss the weather. My men have been gathering evidence. And what does this have to do with me? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Vitiello's dark eyes met mine. Russo's people have been asking questions about you, discreetly but persistently. They're trying to establish your connection to me. A chill ran through me. What have they found out? Nothing beyond the obvious, that you work at one of my restaurants. That you intervened during the incident. His expression softened fractionally. But their interest means you're still perceived as valuable, as leverage. So I'm a target. I said it flatly, not a question. A person of interest, he corrected. Which is why tonight is necessary. I don't understand. Tonight I'm hosting several important associates. People whose support I need if conflict with Russo escalates. He reached across the space between us, taking my hand in his. His touch was warm, his fingers strong. Your presence sends a message. I stared at our joined hands, then pulled mine away. What message? His smile didn't reach his eyes. That you are under my protection, that anyone who harms you answers to me. You're using me as bait, I realized, anger flaring. Dangling me in front of your enemies. No, he said sharply. I'm making it clear that you are not a weakness they can exploit. There's a distinction. I turned back to the window, watching the city lights blur past as we climbed into the hills toward his estate. Do I have a choice in any of this? You always have choices, Ellie. His voice was quiet, but not all choices lead to survival. We arrived at his home to find it transformed. Lights illuminated the exterior. Valet attendants waited to take cars from arriving guests. Security personnel stood at discrete intervals throughout the property. Inside, staff moved efficiently through rooms prepared for entertaining, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Vitiello led me through the house with a hand at the small of my back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. I was acutely aware of the eyes that followed us. The staff, the early arrivals, the ever-present security. Your role tonight is simple, he said quietly, as we paused in a quieter alcove. Stay by my side. Speak when spoken to. Reveal nothing of your background or how we met. What am I supposed to be to you? I asked, heart racing. Your date? Your girlfriend? Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or something darker. You are simply mine. Let them draw their own conclusions. Before I could protest this characterization, the first wave of guests approached. Vitiello's hand returned to my back, a silent reminder of my role. I pasted on the same practiced smile I'd used countless times at Bellissimo, the one that never quite reached my eyes. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Vitiello's associates were a study in contrasts, some flamboyant in their wealth, others so understated they could have passed for accountants, rather than what I assumed were fellow criminals. Their wives and girlfriends eyed me with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. I said little, following Vitiello's instructions. When asked directly about myself, I kept my answers vague. I drank 1 glass of champagne slowly, needing to keep my wits sharp. Vitiello, I noticed, did the same with his whiskey, taking small sips, never refilling. He played his role with practiced ease, the perfect host commanding respect without demanding it. I began to understand the source of his power. It wasn't just fear or wealth, but a natural authority that made others defer to him almost unconsciously. As the evening progressed, I noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The initial conviviality gave way to something more serious. Men began to peel away from their companions, gathering in smaller groups for quieter conversations. Vitiello leaned close to me, his breath warm against my ear. The real business begins now. Stay with Sophia. As if summoned, the elegant woman appeared at my side. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated, clearly meant to blend rather than stand out. "This way, Miss Matthews," she said with a professional smile. "The ladies are gathering on the terrace for dessert." I followed her reluctantly, glancing back to see Vitiello already deep in conversation with 3 men whose names I'd already forgotten. His expression had changed, the genial host replaced by something harder, more calculating. The ladies' portion of the evening was exactly what I might have expected. Stilted conversation over elaborate desserts and coffee, the women assessing each other's jewelry and dresses with practiced eyes. I was clearly an outsider, my borrowed finery no match for their designer wardrobes and generations of wealth. "So," said a striking redhead, whose name I thought was Gabriella, "how long have you and Alessio been together?" All eyes turned to me, the question everyone had been too polite to ask directly now hanging in the air. "We're still getting to know each other," I said carefully. Gabriella's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched. "Interesting. Alessio isn't usually one to bring new acquaintances to these gatherings." "Perhaps he's finally ready to settle down," suggested another woman, her diamond earrings catching the light as she tilted her head. "He's not getting any younger after all." I said nothing, taking a sip of my coffee to avoid responding. These women were probing for weaknesses, testing boundaries. I'd seen the same behavior from the wealthy patrons at Bellissimo, though usually directed at the staff rather than each other. "I think what everyone wants to know," said an older woman whose platinum hair was pulled into a severe bun, "is where he found you. Alessio's tastes are usually more established." The implication was clear. I didn't belong in their world. They wanted to know what made me special enough for Vitiello to break his pattern. Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't violate his instructions, Sophia intervened smoothly. "I believe the gentlemen are rejoining us." Indeed, Vitiello and his associates were returning to the main room. I noticed immediately that something had changed. The men moved with purpose, their earlier social masks replaced by a collective resolve. Vitiello crossed to me directly, ignoring the other women. "We're leaving," he said, his voice low but firm. "Now." I stood without question, recognizing the command in his tone. Whatever had happened during their private discussions, it had altered the course of the evening. He led me quickly through the house, his hand at my elbow. Security personnel appeared around us, moving with coordinated efficiency. Outside, our car was already waiting, engine running. "What's happening?" I asked as he ushered me inside. Vitiello didn't answer until we were moving, the gates of his estate closing behind us. "Russo has made another move," he said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. "One of my warehouses was hit an hour ago. 3 of my men are dead. I stared at him, cold dread spreading through me, and this meeting tonight was to secure support for my response. His expression was glacial, which I now have. I didn't ask what that response would entail. I didn't want to know. Why are we leaving? I asked instead. Wouldn't your home be the safest place? Not tonight. He checked his phone, scrolling through messages with rapid precision. Russo's attack changes the calculus. It means he's decided on open conflict rather than negotiation. Where are we going? Fear made my voice sharper than intended. Vitiello looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine. Something in them softened slightly. Somewhere safe, a property few know about. The car sped through the darkened streets, taking a circuitous route down from the hills, and then east, away from the city center. I watched landmarks pass, trying to orient myself, but soon we were in an area I didn't recognize. Eventually, we pulled into an underground garage beneath a modern apartment building that looked like any other upscale residence. Security was less visible here, but no less present. I noticed cameras at strategic points and a guard station near the elevator. Vitiello led me to a private elevator that required both a keycard and fingerprint recognition. It opened directly into a penthouse apartment that, while luxurious, was far more understated than his hillside mansion. My private residence, he explained, watching my reaction. Few people know of its existence. The implications of that statement, that he had brought me to a place he kept secret from most of his own organization, were not lost on me. Why am I here? I asked, standing awkwardly in the center of a living room decorated in shades of gray and blue. Why not take me home? Vitiello removed his jacket, draping it over a chair. The action was casual, domestic almost, at odds with the tension radiating from him. Your apartment isn't secure enough, he said simply, not with Russo escalating. So I'm a prisoner now? His eyes flashed. You are under my protection. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. My fear was morphing into anger, giving me courage I might otherwise have lacked. You've completely taken over my life, my job, my father's care, and now where I can live. All because I made the mistake of saving your life. I expected him to react with anger. Instead, he crossed to a bar cart in the corner, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. Do you regret it? He asked quietly, handing one to me. Saving me? The question caught me off guard. Did I? If I'd known then what I know now, that my impulsive act would bind me to this dangerous man, would upend my entire existence, would I have still knocked him out of the path of that bullet? I don't know, I answered honestly, taking the glass but not drinking. I was doing what I was trained to do. Preserve life. Ah, yes, the nursing student. He took a sip of his drink. Always the healer, even for those who perhaps don't deserve healing. I don't get to make that judgment, I said. No healthcare worker does. We treat everyone, saints and sinners alike. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. And which do you think I am, Ellie? I met his gaze steadily. I think you're a man who's made choices. Choices that have led to other men wanting you dead. Choices that now mean 3 of your men won't go home to their families tonight. The smile vanished. For a moment, raw pain flashed across his features, so genuine it startled me. Then it was gone, his expression controlled once more. You see more clearly than most, he said. It's refreshing and dangerous. Dangerous to whom? He didn't answer directly. The guest room is through there, he said, nodding toward a hallway. You'll find everything you need. We'll discuss next steps in the morning. Next steps? I set down the untouched drink. There are no next steps. Once this situation with Russo is resolved, I go back to my life. That was the deal. Vitiello studied me for a long moment. Is that what you truly believe is possible now? The question hung between us, unanswered. Because deep down, I was beginning to understand the truth. There was no going back. The moment I'd pushed Alessio Vitiello out of the path of that bullet, I'd set in motion events that couldn't be undone. My old life was already slipping away, like sand through my fingers, and the most terrifying part wasn't the danger or the loss of control. It was the small, treacherous part of me that found Alessio Vitiello fascinating, the part that wondered what it would be like to be truly his, as he'd so casually claimed I was earlier that evening. Sleep eluded me that night. The guest room was luxurious. A king-sized bed with sheets softer than any I'd ever touched. A bathroom with marble fixtures and expensive toiletries, but it felt like another gilded cage. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events that had led me here, searching for the moment when I could have made a different choice. Dawn was breaking when I finally gave up, slipping from the bed to stand at the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was stunning, the city awakening below, bathed in golden light, so beautiful, and so far removed from the violence that simmered beneath its surface. I showered and dressed in clothes I found in the closet. Simple jeans and a sweater that somehow fit perfectly, another unsettling reminder of Vitiello's attention to detail. When I emerged from the guest room, I found him in the kitchen, his back to me as he prepared coffee. He wore black pants and a gray Henley that clung to his broad shoulders, the most casual I'd seen him. "Good morning," he said, without turning, as if he'd sensed my presence. "Did you sleep well?" "No." I saw no point in lying. He turned then, 2 mugs of coffee in his hands. His face showed signs of his own sleepless night, a slight shadowing beneath his eyes, a tightness around his mouth. Nor did I. He offered me one of the mugs. I took it hesitantly, the ceramic warm against my palms. "Has there been any news?" He understood my meaning immediately. "My men are in position. We're waiting." "For what?" "The right moment." He gestured toward a breakfast bar overlooking the kitchen. "Eat something. Sit." A platter of fruit, pastries, and yogurt sat on the counter. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until that moment, having skipped dinner the night before in the midst of all the chaos. We ate in silence for a while, an oddly domestic scene that belied the dangerous reality surrounding us. I watched him covertly, this man of contradictions. In the soft morning light, with his guard slightly lowered, he looked almost normal. Almost. "I need to call my father," I said finally. Vitiello nodded. "Use this." He slid a phone across the counter. "It's secure." I took it, our fingers brushing briefly. "Does he know? About what's happening?" "He knows you're safe. Nothing more." His dark eyes held mine. I thought it best not to worry him given his condition. I called the hospital, relieved when my father answered, sounding stronger than he had in months. I gave him a carefully edited version of events, telling him I was staying with a friend for a few days, that my apartment had plumbing issues. He didn't believe me. I could hear it in his voice, but he didn't push. "Just be careful, Ellie," he said before hanging up. "Remember what I said about debts." When I ended the call, I found Vitiello watching me intently. "He's important to you," he observed. "Your father." "He's all I have," I said simply. "Since Mom died, it's just been the 2 of us." Something like understanding flickered in his eyes. Family is everything. The way he said it, with quiet conviction, made me wonder about his own family. I realized how little I knew about him, beyond his reputation and what I'd observed firsthand. "Do you have family?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. "I did," he said finally. "My parents died when I was young. I had a brother once." The past tense hung heavy in the air. I didn't ask what happened to his brother. The pain in his eyes told me enough. "Is that why you do this?" I gestured vaguely, encompassing his life, his choices. "Because of what happened to them?" A shadow crossed his face. "We are all shaped by our pasts, Ellie. But we choose our futures." He stood abruptly, taking his empty mug to the sink. "I have calls to make. Make yourself at home." He disappeared into what I assumed was his office, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I explored the apartment cautiously, feeling like an intruder. It was spacious but not ostentatious, the decor minimalist but expensive. No photos, I noticed. No personal touches that might reveal anything about the man who lived here. Hours passed. I found books to read, tried to distract myself, but anxiety kept me on edge. Vitiello emerged occasionally to check on me, his expression growing more tense each time. Something was happening, or about to happen. I could sense it. It was late afternoon when his phone rang. He answered immediately, listening intently, his face hardening into a mask I now recognized as his business expression. "When?" he asked, eyes flicking to me. Are you certain? Yes. Proceed as planned. He ended the call, setting the phone down carefully on the coffee table. We've located Russo, he said, voice neutral. He's been tracked to a warehouse on the east side. My men are moving in now. My heart raced. What does that mean? What's going to happen? It means this ends tonight. He moved to a cabinet, unlocking it to reveal a handgun, which he checked with practiced efficiency before tucking it into a holster at the small of his back. I need to go. Fear clutched at me. You're going there? Personally? But it could be a trap. Of course it could be a trap, he said calmly. But some things a man must do himself. I stood, crossing to him before I could think better of it. Don't go. Send your men. Stay here where it's safe. He studied me, something softening in his eyes. Why do you care what happens to me, Ellie Matthews? I've disrupted your life, put you in danger. By your own admission, you may regret saving me in the first place. I didn't have an answer that made sense. I just knew that the thought of him walking into danger made my chest tight with fear. Because I don't want more blood on my hands, I said finally. If you die because I saved you once. That's not how this works, he interrupted gently. My choices are my own, as are their consequences. He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek in a gesture so tender it caught me off guard. You'll be safe here. Sophia will come for you when it's over. And if you don't come back, I whispered, then you'll be free. His voice was soft. Arrangements have been made, your father's care, your education. All of it secured regardless of what happens to me. Before I could respond, he leaned down, pressing his lips to my forehead in the briefest of kisses. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a quiet finality. I stood frozen, my skin tingling where his lips had touched. In that moment, something shifted inside me, the realization that my feelings for Alessio Vitiello had become dangerously complicated. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. I paced the apartment, watched the city lights come on as darkness fell, checked my phone obsessively, though there was no one who would call. I tried to imagine returning to my old life, nursing school, my small apartment, waitressing at Bellissimo. It felt like a distant dream now, belonging to someone else. It was past midnight when the door finally opened. I leapt to my feet, heart in my throat. Alessio stood in the doorway, his clothes immaculate, no visible signs of violence or struggle. But his eyes, those dark, unfathomable eyes, held a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. It's done, he said simply. Relief flooded me, followed immediately by dread. Russo will trouble us no more. His voice was flat, emotionless. I didn't ask if he'd killed the man himself. I didn't want to know. The knowledge was there in his eyes anyway. In the careful way he held himself, like a man carrying a weight no one else could see. He crossed to the bar, pouring himself a drink with measured precision. I noticed his hand trembled slightly, the first crack in his composure I'd ever witnessed. What happens now? I asked softly. Vitiello took a long swallow of his drink before answering. Now there will be negotiations, territories redistributed, new balances of power established. He looked at me over the rim of his glass. But the immediate danger has passed. You can return to your life, the words I'd been waiting to hear for days. Freedom, safety, normalcy. So why did they leave me feeling hollow? Just like that? I asked. After everything that's happened, isn't that what you wanted? A hint of bitterness crept into his tone. To be free of me and the complications I've brought into your life? I moved closer to him, drawn by something I couldn't name. Yes. I don't know anymore. I searched his face. You've turned everything upside down. Nothing feels the same. He set down his glass, closing the distance between us. Nothing is the same, Ellie. You stepped into my world, and it changed you, as you changed me. I didn't change you, I protested. Didn't you? His voice lowered. Do you know how long it's been since someone surprised me? Since someone acted without calculation or self-interest? You saved my life not for gain or advantage, but because it was in your nature to do so. He reached out, his fingers brushing mine. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? I didn't pull away. Your world is not mine. It could be, he said quietly. If you wanted it. The implication hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility. I thought of my father's words about debts that cost more than money. I thought of the women at Vitiello's dinner party, their curious, assessing gazes. I thought of Sophia's warning that he didn't form attachments easily. What exactly are you offering, Alessio? I used his first name deliberately, watching his reaction. Something kindled in his eyes, a choice, a real one. He took my hand fully in his. Come with me. Not as payment of a debt, not out of fear or obligation, but because you choose to. And if I say no, then you walk away. Your father's care continues. Your education is funded. You never see me again. His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. But if you say yes, if I say yes, then we build something new, together, on our terms. I looked up at him, this dangerous, complex man who had upended my entire existence. The smart choice was to walk away, to reclaim the life I'd been building before a red dot on his chest had changed everything, but that life suddenly seemed small, constrained. A safe path, but one without the fire and intensity I'd glimpsed in Alessio's world. In him. I'm not cut out for your world, I said softly. I'm a nurse, not a criminal, he finished for me, with a sad smile. My world needs healing too, Ellie. Perhaps more than most. I thought about that. About the pain I'd glimpsed beneath his controlled exterior. About the men who had died last night. About choices and consequences. And roads not taken. I need time, I said finally. To think. To be sure, he nodded, releasing my hand reluctantly. Of course, take all the time you need. 3 months later, I stood in the hospital corridor, adjusting my nursing scrubs as I prepared for rounds. I'd re-enrolled in the program as planned, but had also secured an internship at Mount Sinai, the hospital where my father was still receiving treatment, though he was well enough now to have moved to an outpatient basis. My life had found a new rhythm. I'd moved from my old apartment to a safer building closer to the hospital. I'd resumed my studies with a focus and clarity I hadn't possessed before. And twice a week, I had dinner with Alessio Vitiello. We were building something slowly, carefully. Not a relationship based on debt or fear or obligation, but one founded on choice and growing understanding. I was learning about his world, the parts of it he was willing to share. And he was learning about mine. There were boundaries, of course. Lines I would not cross. Compromises he would not make. But in the space between, we'd found something neither of us had expected. Connection. As I checked my patient charts, my phone buzzed with a text. Alessio. Dinner tonight? I have news. I smiled, typing my reply. Your place. 7 p.m. Later, as we sat across from each other in his kitchen, the same one where we'd shared coffee that tense morning after the gala, he told me his news. I'm restructuring my businesses, he said, watching my reaction carefully, moving more resources into the legitimate operations, restaurants, real estate, the casino. I set down my fork. Why? He reached across the table, taking my hand as had become his habit. Because some things are worth changing for. I squeezed his fingers, understanding the magnitude of what he was saying. Not a complete transformation. I wasn't naive enough to believe that, but a shift, a rebalancing, a choice. Is this what you want? I asked. Or is it for me? Both, he answered honestly. I've lived one way for a long time, Ellie. It's brought me power, wealth, but not, he hesitated. Not what? Peace, he said simply. Not until you crashed into my life, knocking me off my carefully plotted course. I smiled at his choice of words, a reference to that first night, when I'd literally crashed into him to save his life. I seem to have a habit of disrupting your plans. Thank God for that. He lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my palm. So what do you say, Ellie Matthews? Will you continue disrupting my well-ordered existence? I looked at him. This man of shadows and light, danger and tenderness, The choice I'd been pondering for months crystallized into clarity. "Yes," I said, "for as long as you'll let me." His answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, rare and all the more precious for it. "That might be a very long time." "I'm counting on it," I replied, leaning across the table to seal our future with a kiss. In saving Alessio Vitiello's life, I had irrevocably changed my own, but as his arms came around me, I knew I wouldn't have it any other way. Some choices reshape our entire existence. This one had given me not just a new path, but a partner to walk it with. Complicated, dangerous, and ultimately mine.